Have you ever been a witness to something so horrifying it leaves you completely unsettled? We often get desensitized to real life and death scenarios because we are not there in that moment and we watch from behind a phone screen. But what if you were there in that moment? How would you react? Imagine yourself being a witness to a murder, or on the flip side of that, imagine yourself being the one to cause such violence. But in reality, that's neither here nor there. What we will be discussing in this video is 3 interviews with people who have been a witness to a gruesome act or have committed one themselves. On July 30th, 2008, Tim McLean was butchered and cannibalized by Vincent Lee in an unprovoked attack that remains shocking to this day. Tim McLean, a carnival worker, boarded Greyhound Canada bus 1170 in Edmonton. The 22-year-old was traveling home to Winnipeg, where his pregnant girlfriend was waiting, and chose to sit in the back of the bus and listen to music. At around 6 p.m., a passenger named Vincent Lee boarded the bus in Erickson, Manitoba. Witnesses claim that Lee struck his fellow passengers as agitated and somewhat confused, but that he settled quietly into a seat near the front of the bus. After a stop, however, Lee moved to the back of the bus and positioned himself next to McLean, who was asleep with his head against the window. Then, shortly before 8:30 p.m., chaos erupted as Lee unleashed a frenzied attack on McLean, repeatedly stabbing the younger man in the neck and chest with a large knife. The driver pulled the bus over and most passengers fled, but one, a young veteran, tried to intervene with the help of a truck driver who spotted the commotion. Despite their efforts to help, Lee kept them back by slashing his knife through the air. They were forced to join the other passengers on the side of the road, though they locked the bus so that Lee couldn't escape. Horrifically, Lee then lifted McLean's severed head up to the window for the other passengers to see. He continued to dismember McLean's body and, in a truly sickening display, even consumed parts of his body. The young veteran describes the gruesome details in this interview.
I was just reading a book. All of a sudden I heard a guy screaming. I turned around and the guy sitting right next beside me was standing up and stabbing another guy with a Rambo knife, pretty much. It was a big survival knife like this in the throat. Repeatedly. Told everybody to get off the bus. Everybody started to get off the bus. The guy still kept stabbing him. Everybody got off the bus. Me and a trucker that had stopped and the Greyhound driver ran up to the door to maybe see if the guy was still alive or we could help or something like that. And when we all got up, we seen that the guy was cutting off the guy's head. He was cutting off the guy's head there, and he saw us. He came back to the front of the bus, told the driver to shut the door. He pressed the button and the door shut, but it didn't shut in time, and the guy was able to get his knife out and take a swipe at us, so we backed off the door, and I ran around the back side of the bus driver took off, and then we both returned to the front to see what had happened, and he hadn't gotten off the bus. The door was still open. We shut the bus door that time and shut it. It was at that point that he started walking to the front of the bus, and he had the head in his hand, and he just looked at us like this and dropped it on the ground, like totally calm. The 3 of us had weapons from the trucker's truck there, and we just stayed outside while he tried to get out the door, telling him, "No, stay put, stay there, don't try to come out." He tried to get the bus working, and the bus driver disabled the bus somehow in the back. I'm not sure how he did it. It was at that point I think that the police showed up and kicked us off, got us to the end of the bus there.
How were people reacting?
Some people were puking, some people were crying, other people were in shock.
Were people running? Were they screaming?
Yeah, everybody was running, screaming off the bus. Like when it happened, I think I was the first one to really realize what was going on. And just screamed like, "Stop the bus, someone's getting stabbed, everybody get the hell off." The people at the front of the bus didn't really understand what was going on, so it it almost turned into like a trample scene there, and everybody trying to get off the bus. But the guy, he didn't care at all. He wasn't concerned with anybody but the guy that he was stabbing.
What did the guy look like? Did you get a look at him?
The killer?
Yeah.
He's either Chinese or native. That's all I can say. 6 feet, 200 pounds, he's wearing sunglasses, bald head. He looked totally calm. He didn't say a word, I don't think, to anybody on the bus. I think he got out and had a cigarette with one girl. Nothing, just totally calm. The guy that he stabbed was listening to his headphones and sleeping. He didn't do anything to provoke the guy. The guy just took a knife out and stabbed him. Started stabbing like.
Warren Barnes was a 69-year-old homeless man living in the city of Grand Junction, Colorado. He was known around the downtown community to read books and sit on a chair most of his time near Monique's Bridal, a wedding shop in downtown Grand Junction. He was nicknamed the Reading Man by some of the store owners due to his interest in books. People described Warren as a gentle and quiet individual. Customers and employees of nearby stores gave him books, occasional pastries, peaches, and drinks. However, Warren Barnes' life would be taken prematurely by a cold-blooded killer. Brian Cohey Jr. was 19 years old at the time of the murder. He was born on January 10, 2002, but prior to the murder, Cohey had been experiencing mental problems and persistent thoughts about murder. During his police interrogation, he said that he wanted to kill a homeless person or a prostitute, believing that their disappearance would go unnoticed. He would routinely drive around at night, stalking homeless encampments for any potential victims. In 2018, he killed a cat and kept its head in his house for 3 days before discarding it. Due to his alleged fascination with serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, Cohey was nicknamed Dahmer at the high school he attended. On March 1st, 2021, at approximately 1:48 p.m., a 911 call was made from Cohey's parents to report a decomposing human head and hands found in his bedroom closet. As police officers arrived at their house, Brian Cohey approached them and immediately confessed to murdering Barnes. "I've always wondered what murder felt like," he said. He also told officers the victim's name, the weapon used to kill him, and the location of the murder. Cohey was detained and taken to the police station for interrogation. He told the interrogator that he was driving around and saw Warren sleeping under a bridge. He exited his car, put on 3 layers of gloves, and started stabbing Warren with a knife. According to him, before he died, Warren was yelling, "What are you doing? Why?" in a panic. He described himself growling and making animalistic noises as he was stabbing Warren. After killing him, he cut off his hands and head and placed them into plastic bags before putting them in his car. He drove them home and hid them, then cleaned the blood from his knife and car and went to sleep. He confessed to traveling back to the crime scene and unsuccessfully attempting to dispose the remaining body parts by placing them in the trunk of his car and dumping them into the Colorado River, flooding his car in the process. His car was towed out of the water by the police department, and Cohey was allowed to leave the scene without suspicion. He confessed to taking pictures of Warren's body before deleting them, quote, because they were evidence. The pictures were later recovered from his phone by the authorities. This is the chilling interrogation of Brian Cohey Jr.
And eventually driving underneath the bridge near the sheriff's office. You know, like how... Can I? Oh yeah, go ahead. There's a road underneath, right? Out under the overpass. And I was driving along, and I see a shape here on the railway track. So I'm like, oh, interesting. So I go up, and as I'm looking, I see a large thing wrapped in a canvas. Okay. And I'm like, that's a homeless person. So I grabbed my knife, I put on 3 layers of gloves, because plastic gloves can betray their users because they're so thin, those vinyl gloves, by imprinting your fingerprints through. So I put on 2, 3 on one hand. I took the knife, I pulled back the canvas, and I stabbed his neck.
Okay.
He was panicking at first in his old man voice. He was in his 50s. I know why I call him an old man. He was saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Why? Ah!" And I just kept on stabbing his neck. This is okay if I do a demonstration.
Oh, yeah.
This is him. I was strapped on top of him like this.
Okay.
And he couldn't fight back. It was actually surprisingly easy. I was barely breaking a sweat. I thought, oh, this guy, he's going to be tough. But no, it was actually surprisingly easy. And during the time, I was growling and making animalistic noises.
Why were you doing that?
I suppose it was a frenzy.
Okay.
I was so excited, so rushed up on adrenaline, and I was just, woo-hoo. And I paused, and he said, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "I've been wanting to do this for a long time, murder someone." And then I continued. The whole ordeal lasted about a minute and a half.
Okay.
And I stabbed, and when I was finished stabbing him, he took out his last breath, a grunt, and his head was halfway cut off in stabs. All the while, no, actually, after I killed him, I just couldn't stop saying, "Stinky, dirty, dirty, stinky, stinky." And then I left his body there. And then I took the head, put it in a leftover pizza box from the dinner a few nights ago. And then I took the hands, put them in the back, drove home, hid the hands and head in my room.
In the afternoon hours of April 26, 2003, Aaron Ralston was canyoneering alone through the Blue John Mountain in eastern Utah. While descending the lower stretches of the canyon, a suspended boulder dislodged while he was climbing down from it. The boulder smashed his left hand and then landed on his right hand, crushing it against the canyon wall. A possible mistake he had made was not informing anyone of his hiking plans, nor did he have a way to call for help. Assuming that he would die without intervention, he spent 5 days slowly sipping his water and eating his 2 burritos, while repeatedly trying to free his arm. After 3 days of trying to lift and break the boulder, the dehydrated and delirious Ralston prepared to amputate his arm in order to free himself from the boulder and have a chance at survival. After running out of food and water on the 5th day, Ralston decided to drink his own urine. He carved his name, date of birth, and presumed date of death into the sandstone canyon wall and videotaped his last goodbyes to his family. After waking at dawn the following day, he discovered that his arm had begun to decompose due to the lack of circulation and became desperate to tear it off. Ralston would then use the boulder to purposely break his arm so it could in some way make the self-amputation process a bit easier. Aaron used a dull 2-inch knife to amputate his forearm and used pliers for the tougher tendons. Aaron Ralston eventually freed himself and hiked out of the canyon, finding a couple from the Netherlands on vacation. The couple and their young son gave Aaron food and water and helped him get medical attention. He also contacted local authorities to let his family know he was still alive. His severed hand and forearm were retrieved from under the boulder by park authorities, and Aaron would later cremate his arm and scatter the ashes upon returning for an interview on his brave and miraculous escape.
I started prodding around and I stuck the knife down in and at my thumb at that spot, and it slid in like I was sliding it into a pat of warm butter, and it went in. I couldn't feel it, of course, but it went in about a ½ inch, and then this hissing sound of gas the decomposition gases releasing from inside my arm, my hand, where they'd been building up as my hand was decomposing over those 5 days. And that threw me into a panic. It scared me. It appalled me. It was a gruesome concept that my hand was decaying while still attached to my body. And I started yanking my hand, my arm, and I was giving it everything that I had, and was twisting myself around and trying to slide my arm up and down like this. And
then, in an instant, Ralston realized what he had to do to save his life.
It came to me, this epiphany that I could break the bones, because my arm was caught so tightly that I could torque myself. The other bones.
Torque, a basic principle to a former engineer like Ralston. Remember, he had made an initial attempt to amputate his arm 2 days before, only to realize there was no way his pocket knife could slice through the bones. But if he could break them, maybe he'd have a chance. He would have to snap both of the bones in his arm to make it work.
And so I slammed my body against the opposite wall. I grabbed the backside of the boulder and even got my feet up to where I was standing halfway up the wall and grabbing the backside of the rock and humping my body over it until finally that bottom bone snapped. And this pow sound went kind of echoing through the canyon. And I don't even know if I started feeling excited at that point, but I just knew the next thing that I had to do was that I had to break the other bone. And so I grabbed the bottom side of the rock and pushed and tried to sink myself down until I was pushing up to create the downward leverage on the top bone until it too made the same noise, pow, and snapped in the same spot, thankfully, right where my wrist was caught. They both broke right along here, just behind the bones of my wrist.
But now you've got to cut off the arm.
Yeah, and I said to myself, here we go, Aaron, you're in it now. And I took my knife.
Its blades were now bent and dull from days of stabbing at the rock.
At first I still had the larger blade out, and I held it up against my arm, and I started pushing into it, and I couldn't get the knife to sink in, and so I switched over and I pulled out the smaller blade, and with the smaller blade then I actually started the amputation. The smaller one was still a little more sharp.
The smaller blade was just 2 inches long.
I just dove into this exercise, this surgical procedure, and started cutting away. And
he cut through the top layer of skin and muscle until he saw an artery. Only then did he realize he'd forgotten to apply the tourniquet he had fashioned days earlier from the insulated lining of his water bottle.
I put the tourniquet on, and I was bleeding down the wall, and I severed the artery. And
he cut through more muscle and 2 more arteries, then tendon, the most difficult layer. His dull knife was unable to cut through.
So I ended up taking the pliers side of the knife and using that to grab and twist and rip until the tendon gave way.